Dick Cheetah. Welcome.
Dick Cheetah, 21833 Healy. Being this is the first meeting on the budget, I guess there's a lot of ground that you're going to cover in the next few weeks. And it appears that your proposed is about a 7.5% increase. I think you all know that the levy portion is the flexible portion of taxes, that the commitments for bonds, et cetera, are fixed. And as you add to them, it's like adding a second mortgage to your house and a third mortgage and a fourth mortgage. Pretty soon your value of the house is over mortgaged. The concern that I have is in the past we've had discussions on whether the general public is being served or are special interest groups being served. And I think that's what has to be looked at when you look at the budget. There are areas that serve a very minor part of our community, but absorb a substantial part of the funds. I think that per capita, when compared to other communities, some of our areas are way out of line. We're charging per capita far more than what surrounding communities. I think everyone is a little different, and you look at what your delivery and the needs of your community. But I think that you have to also take a look at the plan for the future, because it seems as though Forest Lake has been bypassed. When I say that, I go through Hugo every day. They're growing a lot of commercial, a lot of residential. I went over the weekend up through North Branch in Cambridge. Unbelievable, the amount of commercial base that Cambridge has acquired. And their population is 8,000. You know, 35% of what we are. So the vision of the people who are doing the directing is very important. And it does have a great impact on the future of the community. I think that when you look at some of the issues, I live on the lake, I know what taxes are on the lake, but I also know that starting and maintaining the lake in the middle of July is 2 months too late. Most of you, except for Sam, have not been here long enough to recall the times back in the 70s and 80s when the lake was full of weeds and they dumped chemical into the lake and they had a major fish kill, and the DNR stepped in, and that's when we started looking at harvesting. The harvesting, if it's done properly and early enough, you get, before they blossom out and the seeds are sown, it's collected. And it takes time, but the lakes, and most of the lakes that are doing harvesting are keeping them pretty clean. I haven't seen this lake as dirty in the past years as it was this year. And part of it is the reason is the temperature and the direction of the wind. Maybe the south side got the brunt of it. Who knows, that type of thing. But the lake is a major asset to this community. It's a draw, and it's something that I'm just going to guess that probably over 60% of the residential taxes for the city of Forest Lake are collected around the lake. There isn't a residential property up here off the lake that's paying over $40,000 a year in taxes, but there is on the lake. That's a monumental number. And when you don't have a lake that's usable, it's just a matter of time before the public decides that it's time to talk to the tax assessor about reevaluating the value of it. If you can't use it, you might as well have a picture hanging on the wall and look at that. But we have a number of items that should be addressed, and this is the time to do it. You know, the monies, I don't know how 7.5% is going to fly. I don't know that it didn't appear to show here whether there was an increase in your bonding costs. Who knows? But I think that some of the habits of the past have to change. I think you can't continue to as in the past, raid the water and sewer funds and then turn around and go to the people that are on water and sewer and tell them you have to raise the rates. Doesn't make sense. Enterprise funds are supposed to stand on their own. They're supposed to be self-sufficient, and if they don't have the money, they don't spend it. That's not the way it's been here. So I hope now that you're going into this process, that you look hard at serving the public, the greater portion of the public, the infrastructure, some of those things that we really benefit from. And don't make any more deals with Washington County trade-offs and get roads that are worn out and need millions of dollars worth of repair for a link of road that they haven't even touched. That wasn't a very good trade, but I don't think you folks were on the board when that took place, so can't blame you for that, but you never know. The county always has some kind of a program that they're looking at fishing you into. So I hope that you do a good job on this and that it's something that is going to work for the rest of the public and that we can be proud of it when it's all over. Thank you.
Thank you. Closes open forum for this evening. And we'll turn over to Patrick, lead us through budget workshop discussion items.
Yes, we have a small presentation that we'll go over. It shouldn't take too long. It just outlines the budget as presented. Just the one area that we will not cover is the TIF funds tonight. Those are fairly straightforward and very small and pretty are self-sustaining. So we won't go over those, but we'll include those at a later date, just so you have some information regarding that. But we will cover, at least in brief, all of the other funds tonight to give you an idea where we're going and what our thoughts are for the next few years, well, next year and for the next few years here. So first of all, we talked earlier about a schedule. Tonight here we are here for the first budget, which is presented tonight. The schedule, according to what we came up with in the past, is we have a 6 p.m. budget workshop on September 9th. We'll also then, if necessary, have a third budget workshop on the 16th of September. And the most important date on this schedule is the 23rd, where we have to certify the proposed levy that needs to be to the county by the end of September. September 30th is the due date. So that's the most important. We will have an opportunity to continue to review the budget, if you wish, after the 30th of September, because final certification isn't due to the county until December 20th. But under statutes, we have to propose a levy in September and by the 30th. So just in brief, I think everyone knows what a budget is. It's the financial and policy document for how we provide services to our residents. It's really our number one policy document that the city will have. It shows you put your money where your mouth is, basically. It should include, and in this case will include, the operating and capital costs. And for the future, it's an instrument that is looked at by rating agencies when you do your bonding, and it helps determine with your CAFR, or your Certified Financial Plan report, the financial and operational stability of the organization. So the budget's important to not only you as city council members, the citizens, but also to the rating agencies. So what's happened so far in 2019? You've had a lot of changes, I believe. It looks like, to me, there's been a lot of changes, a lot of new things going on. We've hired a new administrator. We've hired we've changed the financial responsibility from the contracted service AEM to an internal finance director. We all know we went through a refuse and recycling process, and I think we're still hearing a little bit about that. We are in the midst of a strategic planning process, which we should have. I have the preliminary results sitting on my desk. We're talking with a consultant for little tweaks that need to be done. Hopefully we'll present those within the next week as soon as we get those tweaks finished. We've completed, to everybody's happiness, is the 2nd Avenue paving after however many years that might be. As you know, we have 5 labor unions, and we have settled 4 of those to date. The final union that we have to negotiate with is the police patrol officers, and that is slated to begin in September. We're really happy that we have these settlements, that they went smoothly. It provides the city and its employees labor peace for 3 years in each contract, which is great. And it also allows us to plan for the future and to budget more accurately, so we know what's coming. We reorganized Public Works to reflect the current operations and get ready for future operations. We've hired a finance director, as I mentioned earlier. We have a new deputy clerk. Police administrative assistant was hired. We hired 2 employees in Public Works. And we have a retirement pending next Thursday in the building inspector, and we're recruiting for that now. Hopefully we'll make some decisions or what the process is going to be and where we're going to go with that. We've also applied for state bonding funds, which for the first time the city has done that. We've never done that before. Each biennial, I believe it is, the state offers a whole bunch of money to local communities and says, here, what do you need from us? What kind of projects can you come up with? And it's been my understanding that we haven't requested funding before. In this case, we submitted 3 applications for funding this year. So we're hopeful that maybe we can get some state money to assist in some of our infrastructure-related needs. In the parks, we've completed the playground in Lakeside Park, and we've done a planning process for Belts Park rehabilitation. And when that gets back, we'll have to, and that's one of the future things in how we figure out what we're going to do with it and how we're going to pay for it. Right now, it's just a planning process, and I think it's been a good community process so far. Looking forward to 2020, we'll try to implement the results of the strategic plan. I'll go through this a little later as well, but we should look closely at bonding for water projects. We have, in the next, I believe it's 3 to 4 years, close to $16 million in projects that we have to do in the water fund. We should be looking really hard at when we're going to bond for those, or if we should bond sooner for those, reflecting the current bond rates that are in the market right now. The bond market the rates are spectacular. I was looking at some of the returns today that other municipalities got, and they're under 2% interest. We should be really looking at trying to take advantage of that, and we will be meeting with our financial advisor next week to go over some of those issues and see what the better ideas and what we can come up with. We need to purchase a new enterprise software system, and when I mean an enterprise software system that's mostly financial, but also would include building, permitting, human resources, finance and budgeting. We need something that's user-friendly. We need something our department heads can access easier so they can keep watch on their own budgets and the transactions that go, whether it's a line item by line item or whether it's by a business unit. We need a better financial and budget program that allows us to budget easier and more intuitively and report out to the council as well on a quarterly basis easier. We have a difficult time doing that now. We need to do a better job there. The systems that we are looking at should also include human resources and payroll, obviously, but also a building permitting, modernize the field inspections for building permitting with tablets, and they can do those things out in the field, and also include a planning and zoning process. So we want to migrate to something new that can help us all work more efficiently and more access by every department head, because right now that's a difficult thing for us to do. Of course, we'll continue to evaluate the operational performance and staffing levels and handle all the day-to-day issues that come on. And again, this business is always a surprise, coming at least once a week, so especially like tonight with signing things. So, oops, sorry, wrong way. I got to go back. Sorry, I messed it up. Oh, well. Go this way. Okay. Expenditure summary. This is just a quick summary of the expenditures that are presented in the budget. It's obvious that the general fund is the biggest portion of our funding. That's where most of our operations go. Park dedication, surface water management, and drug forfeiture. You'll notice that the capital improvement is $6.3 million this year. Well, that has to do with the Good View 97th Street project. And I'll explain that a little later. What we've had to do is accelerate that because it's coming in 2020, and we're going to take our state funds from 2020, 2021, and 2022. So our state share will also help to pay for them, and we'll go through that in a little bit. We have debt service that has studied out. So you see the two debt services there. We have a capital equipment fund of 1.7, a water fund of $2 million, and a sewer fund of $3 million. So we budget for a total of $28 million. That's a nice sized budget. It's something that we need to watch, but it's fairly typical for a city the size of Forest Lake. This is just graphically shows percentages of where your funds are. Again, general fund is 35% of what we do. Again, police, fire, public works, all the activities are in there. So that's just a quick graph. Taxes. Here we're presenting an overall tax view of $11,038,571. This is a 7.55% increase in the property tax requested over 2019. Some of the highlights of this is we're asking for an additional $50,000 in equipment replacement fund. That is to steady that fund and keep it in the black for the next 5 years. We will, again, we'll get to this in a minute. We are asking for additional $250,000 to begin to support our infrastructure, which particularly means paving. Our capital improvement plan is really just our pavement plan. There's really nothing else in our capital improvement plan except paving. There's no buildings, there's no things like that. One of the things that did come out of the strategic plan is an agreement not only by staff, the council, and the citizens of Forest Lake was that our infrastructure needs to be addressed and needs to be planned for. And we will begin to do that. But in order to get a jump, I think we need to get a jump on that. We're going to ask you for additional $250,000 for that process. Debt services stays level, and the EDA stays level. Here's just a quick history of your levy increases. You've gone up and you've gone down. That's not untypical of municipalities. I'd really like to try to smooth that out a little bit in years coming, where we can plan and understand where we're going and have a better idea of keeping a level field. This year's a little different. We've had a lot of changes. We expect more changes to come here in a few years. We're adjusting operations and hopefully We won't have to do too much more of that. We'll get in a smooth place, but that just shows you the erratic behavior of the levy that happens sometimes in situations. The tax rate, the current tax rate right now with available information, which will probably change before December, is that the tax rate is at 40.332. As you can tell by the tax rate, the overall tax rate has gone down in some years, at least since 2017 lately, but it's an overall downward trend, and that's really due to two things. A, your tax levy increase hasn't been that much, but also the value of the land and the property that Forest Lake has in it has increased. So that's why you're seeing a lower tax rate. So we'll have a better adjustment. Just to note, our tax rate of proposed tax rate of 40.332. If you look at the average metro cities with a population of 10,000 to basically 25,000, that rate is at 46.9%. If you look at, we have a list of comparable cities that we compare ourselves to. If you look at the average on those, it's 44.5. And if you look for all of greater Minnesota for the population, cities with a population of 10 to basically 25,000, it's 52. So we're not doing too bad. We're in the ballpark. We're not in 60s or 70 land. So we are kind of doing okay, actually, if you look at it. This is one way to look at it. So, the general fund. General fund, as I mentioned earlier, we've settled all 4 out of the 5 labor contracts, so this reflects always salaries and the benefits that came from those settlements. We're adding a code enforcement position to the budget this year. One of the constant things, or often things I hear, is that we need to enforce our codes and enforce our standards. And whether that's zoning, whether that's property maintenance or whatever, we have a lot of complaints. We have a lot of issues with their, in the most recent one with the fire chief has been the code inspector on one of the major ones, and we have better things to do with our fire chief's time than to have him do code enforcement. So we've restored it. We had a summer intern position in the budget taken out this year. That was to hire, try to split it between a position between the police and planning and zoning. That really didn't work out well. So instead, we hired a administrative assistant in police, and we're putting back that intern in planning and zoning to try to get more done in that area next summer. The gentleman we had here this year did a great job. He's leaving Friday, so we hope to continue that. It will show, the general fund shows the impact of switching to a full-time finance director in place of the contract service. The big difference there is somebody will be sitting in an office 5 days a week instead of 1 day a week. We have a large presidential election next year, so we have to fund that. I believe that was $50,000 for the presidential election. Of course, in a budget process, the people in department heads naturally ask for things that they don't always get. 2 of the examples this time is we were requested for a new police captain's position and a part-time parks and recreation position. We didn't feel we could fund those this year, but at least those are now on the radar and they can be given future consideration and analysis to see if that's something that we want to add in the next few years. That's the general fund. Surface water, there are no changes to the surface water fund. The only note of caution that I have is the cost of projects and things we do in this fund will soon exceed those funds collected. A future rate increase is probably going to be necessary. I keep feeling I'm the sayer of doom that I want to increase rates, but I think it's going to happen. I think we're running out of funds, and the projects are there are so many projects that we have to do that we're going to have to look at that fund and how we operate that fund and what it's going to cost to operate that fund. I mentioned earlier the capital improvement or paving fund. The replacement of streets and curbs and sidewalks, woefully underfunded in this community. We do not contribute any general property tax revenues to the replacement of streets, sidewalks, curbs and gutters. It all comes from state aid, and franchise fees. I find that unusual that no general fund or no property tax levy is going to infrastructure needs, and I think we need to look at that. Our internal goal for basically streets is that all our streets on a scale of 1 to 10 should be at a 5. It would be nice to get to 5. I would say 25, I think if I remember correctly, 25% of our streets are at 4 or below. And that's not including gravel streets. However, the roads continue to deteriorate every year. I mean, if we can do only a mile or 2 a road every year, we're not going to keep up. We're going to have bad roads, and we're going to have troubles. And that's pretty much what we're doing. We get to do a mile or 2, and we're good. But, you know, 700,000 from state aid or 700,000 from franchise fee or 1.5 million doesn't get you a lot of roads. So we need to look again at infrastructure and a plan to fix that. Again, I mentioned earlier the state monies, our share of state monies for roads in 2020, 2021, and 22 is already designated for the Goodview and 97th roundabout. That means we're only going to be able to do approximately $700,000 to $750,000 worth of roads next year. It's not a lot. We are proposing, like I said earlier when we talked about the property tax, to begin to add money to this fund, and that was a $250,000. We also have a fund balance that we're asking or recommending an additional reappropriation surplus of fund balance of $250,000. Future funding sources, future programs. We're recommending, when we can talk about this longer, that we come up with the strategic plan will basically say we need to have a 10-year infrastructure plan. We need to identify water, sewer, roads, curbs, gutters, lights, buildings, parks. We need to know all of what we have and what our needs are, and then try to put it in a plan that we can figure out how to pay for that. 10 years is a good marker. Of course, when you put a 10-year plan together, you need to review it every year. But once we have all those assessed needs, then we will sit down with our financial planners, with staff, and say, okay, how do we fund this? Can we fund it? What's the method? What's the madness here? You know, do we say, okay, great, like I said earlier, bond rates are really low. Do we borrow $20 million? I'm not saying we should, but is that a better idea than to try to raise taxes all the time and try to piecemeal it? And so we have some work to do in 2020 on creating such a plan and bringing it forward to the council and giving you that funding plan as well. It's going to be a challenge for the staff to identify all those needs, whether it's in the parks, whether it's in the streets, whether it's in the water and the sewer, and whether it's in the buildings, and say, okay, here's what we need, and not be overboard on it. I mean, you have a staff that's realistic and smart, and will never. I don't believe the staff goes overboard and tells you they need things that they don't need. Some of the non-major funds that we're budgeting for: airport. In this budget, we have combined the airport fund and the airport runway fund. One, to cut down on the number of funds, but one, to put the expenditures in one place that have to do with the airport. I know the airport runway fund had a $70,000 item in it. That's now combined with the airport fund, and I also understand that the Airport Commission is looking at some of those issues and will continue to that. Headwaters Industrial Park. If the budget goes as presented or close to what is presented, it will be the only fund that's in a deficit position. This is a result of building a Headwaters Industrial Park, spending money on it, and we need to eventually figure out what we're going to do there. We can either decide to take cash out of cash surplus and pay that off and close the fund out, or we can let it sit there until somebody buys the land, and the land sales will pay for whatever that deficit is. Again, it also will depend on what kind of economic incentives may be needed to get people on that land. So. Debt service, again, we're meeting our obligations right now. The need for future levy increases in this fund will probably be necessary, not probably, will be necessary, because right now some of the payment of the debt We have a fund balance in that fund, and we're drawing that down. You don't see debt service funds often with fund balance. It's not something you usually see. So we're going to start to draw that down, but that's probably only a 3 or 5 year drawdown. So we'll probably have to look at, and the debt's not going away, so we'll probably have to look at a levy increase for those obligations somewhere within the next 3 or 5 years. And possibly, again, depending on what the future decisions we make in long-term infrastructure and anything, we may be borrowing more money and we may have to look at the debt, but we'll get there. Capital equipment, that has all of our rolling stock, all of our equipment in it. That reflects a reliable schedule for replacement. Right now it's a 5-year plan. Last year you made a major increase in the funding, up to, I believe it was $750,000 for that. We requested a small increase in 2020, and we will again ask for another one in 2022, so this fund stays in the black and we can still replace the equipment that needs to be replaced through 2024. One of the things we don't want to do is try to get this fund, another fund, to go into the red, but that's what we're proposing. I talked earlier about the water fund. We have major capital projects in front of us at $16.8 million. Go through those really quick. We have the rehab of the treatment plant 1 and 3. We have a well rehab. We have new meters that we need to put in our homes because the meters are failing. And if meters fail, it means we don't get accurate readings. We don't get accurate readings, we don't get the revenue that we expect. 2020 calls for a new water treatment plant, more of the well rehab. 21 continues that. We split the cost between 2 years, continues that treatment plant and well rehab. 2022, we need a new well, new monitoring well, and we need to begin to rehab a water tower. And then finally, in 2023, we continue with the rehab of the water tower, but also we're going to anticipate we need a new water tower. The rate increase that it was adopted, we had a rate increase adopted in 2018 that spelled out what basically the next 10 years of rate increases were going to be. We will look at that again once we we're meeting again with Ellers next Tuesday to talk about the water fund and these projects and what the best way is to fund them, whether we should, again, bond it all immediately or bond it out long term. Depending on what the bond markets and then what that'll do to the rates. But we need to look at that. It's an important thing. $16.8 million is a lot of money, but if you can get it under 2%, instead of getting it under, a third of that now at 2% and another third at 4%, you want to be able to take advantage. I don't believe the bond market is going to go much lower than it sees now, but with the results I'm seeing from other communities today, if we can get a bond under 2%, that would be a significant thing to do. Sewer is currently stable right now. Again, the rate structure that was put in place prior to my coming here is that it expects a 5% rate increase to meet the current expenditures. That's all I have. I know I went through those fairly quickly. If you have questions, please let me know. If you have questions tonight on anything, feel free. We may not be able to answer them all live, but we will keep a list of those and get the answers and feed them back to you as fast and as soon as we can. So that's all I have.
Questions for Patrick? We are in workshop format, so this is intended to be open conversation. Perhaps just to facilitate questions, maybe going back through the slide deck,
Sure.
Slide by slide, asking questions as
Open back up. Yep.
slides come up. I suspect several of you were writing furiously as I was. Is that an okay format?
And I can send you all a copy of the slides.
That would be great.
That'd be great.
That'd be great.
Let me get this back up.
Be able to read it.
I don't think there's a question on the calendar.
Nope.
Okay, well, that's the easiest one so far. These are just recaps. I don't know if you have any issues on the recaps of what we look forward to or what we've done in the past year so far.
Yeah, just a quick clarification
Sure.
on the noteworthy items in 2019.
Yes.
Just worth pointing out, I think the new hires that we had in 2019, several of those were replacements, so it wasn't net new headcount.
Correct.
And then the new headcount that we had, let me confirm. So deputy director was a new position replacing a contract position. Deputy clerk was a replacement of a previous position. Police administrative assistant was a new position but budgeted, as were public works employees.
Correct.
And then the
Building inspector is
building
correct.
inspector is the replacement of a retiree.
Yes.
So just wanted to be transparent on what the plans were for headcount. Can go on to, here we go. Questions on, or specific to this slide? So I have a couple questions on, so enterprise software system, is that, so I'm assuming that is built into the 2020 budget?
Yes, the plan is to, if you recall, we did some financing for the 2 schools, and the schools, what kind of finance, what's that called?
Conduit financing.
Conduit financing, thank you. And it's the city's policy to charge a fee for that, to use its bonding power. We have received approximately $300,000 in conduit funding fees that we've built in and will dedicate to the purchase and implementation of software. It's really a nice way to use a one-time revenue for a one-time expense.
And those fees are received in 2019?
We have those already, yes.
So they're sitting in revenue, they'll sit in sit in surplus, and then the plan is that that's the amount that's spent in 2020?
Either that, or we will come back to you in late 2019 with a contract to award so that we keep it in 19. It just depends on the process. We've already done a lot of investigation on software. I think that we will be able to present a recommendation later in the year so that the years stay constant.
As we're looking at, so part of this, for the accountant in me is trying to reconcile the $475,000 general fund increase. So part of that, is it about $200,000 of that is from those fees, the software?
For the general fund, the levy?
Yes.
No.
No, okay.
No, the general fund is basically the levy as a result of some new additions that we made this year, and the labor contracts. And we've got, like I said, elections. We've got, I think there's another $50,000 in there for studies that we need to do, and that relates to probably the infrastructure studies and getting some of that work done. And we can come up with a better reconciliation of what that may be for you if you wish, though.
That'd be good. Questions, conversation on this particular slide?
How have we, I mean, we're looking forward with regard to the strategic plan, how have we factored that work into the current budget? Or have we? I mean, is that...
We haven't really worked a lot of that into the budget yet. I think knowing the items, and one is, obviously, I've talked a lot about the infrastructure plan. We've budgeted for some studies under the administrator's line items for that, so we may need to use that to help pay for whatever that takes. The other is, one of the other ones was communications, which out of the recommendations was hiring a dedicated staff. We have not done that yet. And the other ones are slipping my mind at this point. But no, the majority of it have not yet been done. But I think the number one issue with the infrastructure plan, that will take most of staff's times and energy in the next year. So I think we will try to recommend other items that were on that, but I know how putting a 10-year plan like that together and then the financing will take quite a bit of time to try to put together and identify all our needs, especially, parks, and I think we have the sewer and the water, and streets pretty well documented through Ryan's firm, but the other buildings and things we probably need to work on a little bit more.
Well, and I recognize that a significant portion of the strategic plan work is that infrastructure, so.
Absolutely it is.
Clearly, we're taking a really good hard look at that in 2020 and, dedicating some time and resources to those
Yes.
improvements. So I recognize also that a lot of that is going to be phased in over time. So I just was wondering if there was any additional detail.
Yeah, and I think that's a
around that.
discussion we need to have. One of the reasons, as we all know, we got the the strategic plan quickly done as possible is to try to have time to integrate it. And fortunately, we still have some time between now and hopefully late November when you get this done, to maybe add things in there if we find that necessary and make some adjustments. But right now, the number one priority will be the infrastructure plan, to put that in place, because that's going to be the driver of a lot of things we do for the next 5-6 years, I think.
This enterprise software system,
Yes.
is that going to allow us to get back to our billing for water and sewer?
That's one thing. It has the ability to do that. We have to look at how that will work and what's the best solution. Whether the question, we haven't had time to even begin to look at that, but the question on water billing is, is the firm that we have doing the best job they can or not? If they're not, is there a different firm that we can use to do that? Or obviously, the C option is, do we bring it back in-house, and what will that take as far as resources go? Do we need more people? Do we need less people? But that's something we'll have to look at. It is included with the program that we are identified right now as the leader of what we think we need. It's a very robust, and it can handle anything we have. It also will integrate with the new meters that we're putting in houses and work seamlessly with the remote reader system that we have. So we have to do some more analysis. Again, that's another one of those big things out there that we have to look at, is the whole water billing process and what's the best way to do it.
There's been some issues in the past, and that's why I brought it up. And
Yeah, we'll have to look at it.
See where we have our own control over it,
Well, and in most places, a lot of places do their own control. It's just a matter of having the right meters. I mean, it's really multi-task. The meters are working right, the remote readers are working right, because what you don't want is to have these guys go out and start reading meters by manually. You want to be able to pull it all in, bill it, shoot it out, and bring it back, and do it almost all electronically. We would like to see all the Forest Lake customers be able to go online, pay their bill, and be done. Not too bad.
Yep.
But we have to, that's just another major component that we'll have to look at.
Well, I recall we talked at length about the efficiencies this investment would
Yes.
bring to the city, including, potentially elimination of overtime, in some of the work that's being done if we have much more robust systems. So I'd love to see a comprehensive cost-benefit analysis around this, including that sewer water side.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure I'll be able to promise you the sewer water side. That is a big thing to look at, because,
Yep.
just off the top of my head, we have one clerk that does the water. Is that clerk enough to do it? Is that the right clerk to do it?
Mm-hmm.
What's it going to take us to get up to speed with that? Where do the mailings go back? How does that impact, if you're one that mails your bills still, we're going to have mail coming in, how fast and who processes that? Do we go to a lockbox system? There's a lot to do with water billing, and that's where I started my career in government, is water billing, water and sewer billing. So I'm pretty familiar with what it is, and it can be complicated. And at least we don't shut water off here. So.
Just so we're not related to Minlars.
Yeah, no, I would not want to be the person in charge of that. I tried to get my driver's license for 6 months, I still haven't been able to get it.
I think the overall idea is real good. I mean, just the whole thing is to make it more efficient And that's why I brought up the water billing, because we had talked about it earlier. And I wish there was a way and so we can eliminate some problems, but.
Something we need to address.
We can go on to the next slide. And perhaps you guys stop if there's any questions. We can maybe advance to the next slide of detail, since this
Just
is a
catch up.
summary.
Can you explain drug forfeiture to me?
Well, I will try to explain that, and if I screw it up, the chief will let me. When we pull people over or have drugs, and we get whatever, there's money or equipment or anything that we seize, we get to keep, or at least a portion of what we get to keep. So now I'm over my head, so I'll let the chief say.
Actually, you're kind of right on. So what happens if you pull over a vehicle, happens to have felony level drugs, maybe it's a DUI. There are certain laws that allow cities, states, feds, counties to forfeit vehicles, the drugs, of course, and then they're destroyed. But it might be cash, it could be anything that was involved in that crime. So for DUI, it's easier an example. We might forfeit their vehicle, and then what happens, it becomes the property of the city. A portion of it is the county and the state. And once it goes through all the court proceedings and everything else, which unfortunately does take a long time, it will go to a state auction. It's sold, and then those monies go to, a portion goes to the city, state, and then the county. And so over the years, this fluctuates. So we just never know how much. We kind of estimate what we've seen historically in the past. It also involves our narcotics task force officer, who is assigned to Washington County. And sometimes they have those really big drug busts. You hear about those sometimes that go, national, where, millions of dollars of cocaine is seized, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars is seized. And that money also goes back. So to the cities, the federal or state, county. So historically, we have seen roughly $30,000 that comes back to the city. And then what we can do with those funds, because there's only certain things we can do with those, is purchasing any kind of equipment for operations that specifically stop those types of crimes. So like for DUIs, it would be purchasing the PBTs, the preliminary breath tests machines. Those funds can be used for other items and equipment that is approved through the county and the state for us to use. So I gave you the real long answer. Any other questions in regards to that?
So they're restricted, basically?
Yes, very, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you got to be very careful, because you can get yourself into a lot of trouble if you use those funds for something else, and we have never done that. We're very good at that.
And then lease revenue.
That was going to be our next one.
Yep.
Lease revenue is the fund that you pay for this building. You lease this building, I believe it's from the EDA. So the money has to be as a lease. And then if you look further down, you see the debt service for the city center is the same number. That's where it's paid. It has to do with how the building was financed and built, that you have to pay the lease payment, and then you transfer that lease payment to the debt service. It's a little bit of an accounting issue, that's all. I would like to just do it out of debt service, but the way we did it here, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, that feels odd to me.
It's odd to me as well.
Madam Mayor, can I just make sure I have a clear definition of the difference between capital improvement and capital equipment fund? Is capital equipment fund strictly vehicles and that kind of
Yes.
stuff?
Vehicles, loaders.
Heat and air conditioning units that we have to put on a roof, would that come under the capital improvement?
Eventually, what we do not do right now is we do not have those anywhere identified for the buildings. We need to begin to add building equipment somewhere. We haven't done that yet. So, for example, actually in this budget, the capital equipment fund does have monies in it for air conditioning in the fire department bay. But we don't do that well, we don't do that enough. So what we should be doing is looking at this building now that it's, 5 years old, and say, okay, here's what we need to identify, here's what we think we need to replace, and start identifying those and budgeting for those. We don't do that. It comes usually out of a building maintenance account or something, or a surplus if we have a major issue, but we need to do that more for the capital equipment. But right now, capital equipment is majorly cars, trucks, fire trucks, loaders, skids, any of those things, plows.
And so on the capital improvement, we don't put any of the building. If we needed a roof somewhere
No,
at $1 million.
Nope. Don't do that yet.
So when we say that we need to have a full comprehensive 10-year capital plan, those are the holes that we're referencing that aren't currently fully planned out that need to be.
Thank you.
So it should be in there, but we have never had a full capital plan for the new building.
So when I look at the list of items in the CIP for 2020, I see somewhere it specifically says replacement. Are most of the items here replacement items, or are some of them new?
Is that the capital equipment or capital
Well, the
improvement?
capital improvement is what I'm looking at here on the,
Unfortunately, it's not page marked.
this one's not page marked. It's the second page in the two summary sheets.
Yeah, I have to get that in front of me. Hold on.
Okay.
I'm sorry, now, looking at the capital what?
It's technically the third page in, the 2020 to 2024 CIP.
Okay.
So, and this is, I guess, the capital equipment piece of this, or it's titled.
Yes, this is capital equipment.
Okay.
So 2020 CIP Capital Equipment Fund 401
Yeah.
on the top right, that's all. Most of this is replacement.
Okay. All right.
I don't think we have asked for anything new since a couple of years ago with the street sweeper, so.
Okay.
So is there a detailed breakout in our packet of the capital improvement, the $6,377,000?
Yes, that's this 211 page. It's not detailed, but it shows the revenues and expenditures. And
Yep.
basically, again, if you see the capital outlay, you've got a combination of a little bit of paving and the roundabout work that was matched. So there's not a lot to explain there, but
And to your previous comment on things that are in our plan versus what needs to be in our plan in the future, Council, you'll see that the capital improvement plan, $6,070,000, is all street work. And in the future, we would like that to see all capital improvements beyond just streets.
yeah, and we probably, we haven't talked about this internally, but this capital improvement plan really is a paving fund. And there's nothing wrong with having a dedicated paving fund. And maybe in the future, we have three funds. One is paving, one is capital improvements, and the third is capital equipment, so that we can know what they are. But really, I've done this in the past. I think you should have a paving fund so that you know where your money's going to go and what it's going to take to do it. And then, as the public looks at your budget, they know, okay, you're going to pave, $3 million worth of streets. So that's something we have to look at, something we will probably look at if we implement new software, and we probably have to look at the chart of accounts that tells us how to structure all the funds and all the business units.
While we're on that page, I know we're kind of skipping around a little bit, but since we're here, can I just, so I did have a question on, so the state aid project street work, a component of the $6 million in 2020 is the $2.9 million for the state aid projects. And again, I just want to make sure I understand, that is related to Goodview and 97, And that's why that line is blank for the next 2 years, because we're essentially taking 3 years of street aid in 1 year. Is that right?
That, which line is blank?
The state aid project street work
Yes.
is blank in 21 and 22, because we're essentially taking all of it for that Goodview 97.
Yes.
So, okay, so that's why if you're looking at the expense, you know, year to year, there's a big leap in 2020, and it's between the grant for the street work and then the Goodview 97.
Is it also why there's a big bump in the local mill and overlay in 2020? And it goes back down? It's a 1.4 for 20 and 1.1 for 21? Is that?
And Dave, you can comment, but I believe that's part of our plan to reallocate $250,000 and up the levy by $250,000. So we wanted to,
Oh, I remember that.
we're in the same, go ahead.
Yes, the 1.47 million would be the normal 975,000 plus a 250,000 drawdown on reserve funds, plus the 250 requested of additional property taxes. That's where you get the 1.47. And in 21, we're not asking for, at this point, a drawdown of reserve funds, so that's why it's that less. And you have to add in, if you look up on the top of revenues, we transfer in money from sewer, water, and storm to help fund infrastructure underneath the road as we're doing these projects. So that was a big chunk in 2020, and it just goes down to 25,000 per fund in 21.
I have no problem with that number in 2020. I'm nervous about shrinking the number after 2020.
So are we.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's part of the analysis we're talking about, though, correct?
Absolutely.
The number in
Long term.
the shrunk number in 2021, this doesn't fully address your question, Councilmember Gerard, but is the 25,000, is that a more normalized number of what we've historically had?
So it's kind of the placeholder is 25,000 just to contribute some. Our plan for 2020 is the areas we're planning on going to. We know one section for sure is the Northwest, which we have an estimate of at least $150,000 just of stormwater work in that Northwest to finish off from Second to Broadway. So as we plan ahead, we televise, and we look at it so we can kind of guess of what that dollar amount is going to be. They may change that transfer out. It may be a question 21 or 22 once we dial in where we're going to pave. It may be requesting $50,000 from the sanitary, because we know there's some spots that need to be lined when we're doing the project. So we try to come into an area and make the whole street all the way down to the utilities last 20 years.
So to Mr. Cheetah's point, when we talk about the transfer from sewer, water, and storm, that transfer is specifically related to repairs and infrastructure for those items, so sewer, water, storm.
Correct, and it's an estimate. So if you do say they have 150,000 is dedicated to the state aid project to relocate sewer, because we have to move it for that roundabout to go in. Well, if the total comes to 123,000, only 123,000 is going to get transferred,
Okay.
And if it is more, then we'll have to figure that out. But I mean, it'll only be, transferred what was actually spent, and it's tracked within the project of what was spent on that utility.
So it's not a subsidy from the enterprise fund, that work is going
It
to
goes
benefit the sewer and the water system?
So
Okay.
that's why the 150,000 is in there for 20, because we already know off the
Yeah.
estimate that it's going to be a minimum of 150,000 just to repair the stormwater in next year's project.
Okay.
Further questions on this? Go
Just
ahead.
to point out too, if you look on the expenditures on repair and maintenance miscellaneous at 307, that used to be at 370. and the state aid is actually dropping every year now, so we've actually lost about $63,000, which will end up getting cut on our seal, our seal coating project, seal coat and chip seal. So our roads are a lot worse than for chip sealing, so we're going to keep the $900,000 continuing on at the state aid, for the project, especially because we need it for the Goodview 97. So that what takes a hit is, that 307 covers our gravel for the year, our patching, our concrete work, and our chip seal projects. So that covers all of our other street work. So to Patrick's point, as of right now in 2019, $0 from property tax goes to any street repair. It comes either from franchise fees or a subsidy from the state of Minnesota. So every dollar that we spend patching a road or putting a dump truck load of gravel on a street, it doesn't come from property tax at all.
Okay. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
No, and
either.
Once we finally started looking into it, I mean, you kind of just saw the monies, but once you looked into it, it's like, yeah, there's not one penny that's being spent, that's dedicated out of when you pay your property tax and you get an angry resident saying, I pay property taxes to have my road patched. Well, that's great, but you're really not paying anything to have your road patched.
I mean, this is a core of the service that we provide.
Yep.
Right.
So,
Right.
is infrastructure, so.
Right. Are there questions on this section, or do we want to move back to walking through the presentation?
I think I have my preliminary questions answered on this section.
Okay.
Cool.
Advance next slide.
That's just,
Probably move on.
it's the property tax.
So
Yeah, this is pretty clear to me.
pulling a couple of maybe prior discussion items into this graphic, the pavement improvement, this is that one-time additional fund.
Well, I don't know if it's one time,
Or
but it's an addition to the levy to begin to address having property tax pay for infrastructure improvements and hopefully getting a head start on whatever the final plan's going to be, because no matter what we do, no matter what the plan's going to say, we can't probably fund it all in the same year. So we need to start to fund it incrementally. And this is an attempt to get a head start on funding improvements incrementally.
I thought we went through that last budget, Mara.
So
What-
did we start a gravel road paving fund?
If you recall, and I recall this in the last meeting when I was fairly new, it was removed to make the budget go down, make the levy go down.
It wasn't totally removed, though.
It was totally
I thought
removed.
it-
250,000 was totally removed.
Patrick, can you say again why it was removed? The 200,
And
the
to
gravel?
lower the levy.
Lower the levy, okay.
Yeah, because we had an excess fund then.
Yeah,
I know we were trying to keep that in there,
yeah.
and it didn't happen, so now we're behind again.
Yeah, I mean, the whole pattern of practice here is that we are catching up and catching up and catching up, and we've delayed things. The city as a whole has delayed things a little longer than they probably should have. And it's painful and it's hard, and nobody likes to have taxes raised or fees raised. And just like the water fund that we had to plug last year because we were falling behind, you see what else is coming. And it'd be irresponsible for us as a staff not to tell you what we need to have, so.
It was never implemented. A few years prior to that, there was a 6% raise and it was never implemented, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next slide.
Go ahead. Can, and I'm not sure if it's in here, I didn't, in all honesty, get a chance to review this or go through it with a fine tooth comb, but is there an opportunity to get a breakdown of that general fund change?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
We will give you a breakdown of the major changes in
Okay.
revenue and expenditures related to the general fund increase, yes.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Agree.
The rest is pretty straightforward for me, so.
Next slide. Graphically showing.
Graphic showing what we've done here. Sorry, our tax rate.
Do you want to go back?
Yeah, and I just want to make a comment on this, and
Which one?
I think that the
The one
previous
prior.
slide, you know, and I think Councilmember Munson probably would agree that when we attended the League of Minnesota Cities conference, and we attended the budgeting workshop, which was outstanding, it was very, very well done. This is precisely what they said to us, is that we should see
Yeah.
steady, small growth, not be up and down and all over the board.
Correct.
Because, you know, it you know, put your tax-paying citizens who are working very hard into a tailspin when they see you jumping from 2.6 to 7.55. And if we were going slow and steady all along, you know, it wouldn't have as great an impact on that bottom line for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And we'd be getting things done like we're supposed to be getting them done.
I would agree with Councilmember Byström. This is essentially, when I was looking at this, what they showed of what not to do as a city.
Exactly.
Yep.
The other thing
Yeah.
I'll.
It's good to see it visually like this.
The other thing I'll say is, one of the things we keep talking about is we need to have the 10-year plan, we need to have the 10-year plan. Well, we need to have the 10-year plan so that if there is a time when council is considering a very small levy increase or whatever that increase is, that it's clear on what's being sacrificed. And that's the part where if you don't have the plan, you don't know what you're missing out on. And I think that's part of why we keep saying we need to have this 10-year plan, so it's illustrative and so that you can make those decisions and you know clearly here's, you know, what has been planned for. And so ultimately, yes, some decisions have to be made and not everything can get done, but we're making a informed decision based on priorities.
And we can't continue to kick the can down the road, especially around the core work that we should be doing.
It's been going on for.
Just gets more expensive.
It does, it just gets more expensive. It again, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but.
I do have a question. I think your next slide is going to be the tax rate.
Yes.
So conceivably, we're looking at a levy increase of 7.5%. That's the proposal on the table. The tax rate stays steady or just essentially goes down slightly. And I just want to confirm and just make sure kind of public is aware as well that that is because of increased rate because property values have gone up.
Yes, that's correct.
So to illustrate that, I think it would be helpful to see sooner rather than later some illustrations on what the proposed rates do to property tax assessments at various home values. In the past, I've seen we've taken a very moderate-sized home, we've taken the average home, and then we've taken a very large, a more expensive home, and just give some illustration to what does that really mean. Because inevitably it's not the 7%, but giving some graphic of what that looks like, I think is helpful.
Good point.
Yes.
It's a good idea.
Any other questions on tax rate?
And again, we'll get probably a better figure on those tax rates as the information comes from the county, and we can, it may be up, maybe down, we just don't, but that's our estimate right now based on what we know.
Perfect.
And this is what I was asking for the breakdown on, like specifics, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get you a better one than this as well.
I do have, I think, an item worth discussing. We talked a lot about code enforcement, and code enforcement has been it's been an area of citizen complaint. It's an area where we tend to have squeaky wheels and, things that do need some attention. The part that I think just from a prioritization standpoint, I think is worth some council consideration is, recommendation is to add a code enforcement position, which is new headcount. But if you see the trade-off on what isn't being added, part-time Parks and Rec position, new police captain position. I believe that is part of the potential for police succession planning in the police department. And so this is an area I'd like to think about a little bit more on where is our priority for 2020, recognizing all are important, but where are we putting our investments first? There's a lot of public discussion around and a lot of public need around parks and recreation, and we have one person who does really great work, but she does the work of one person. I don't know. I'm open to feedback. It's something I will be considering in the next couple of weeks. Thoughts?
I'd be interested in exploring the budget impact of those two positions. You know, let's take a look at it.
I think if you were to look at over a 3-year plan, all 3 are probably needed at some point, or we need to be addressing. I think it's which one do we do first, and I'd like to have a little bit more discussion, exploring what would be added from the positions that are not currently built into the plan, and then how we might, you know, whether it's some contract work or things we might be able to do related to code enforcement, just explore some options there. Is that an area you can bring back some more detail and we can explore
Oh,
in
yeah,
future
yeah,
discussion?
we'll cost that out for you. That's not a
I'd
problem.
like to talk to a couple of people along the way and kind of weigh the evidence to it along the way before we make a decision on that.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay.
I would just make an extra comment on that, though. I have a lot of confidence and faith in our staff to let us know where needs are.
I agree.
And we talked a lot during strategic planning about aligning those human resources, you know, with need. So, you know, I do think we need to take a comprehensive look at that.
Agreed. We talked about this a little bit already. I just wanted to confirm, did you say that the assessment that you did, 25% of our streets were currently rated a 4
Or below, yeah.
or below? The detail on that would be great for us to see at some point, just something for us to have in our back pocket. It is one of the drivers of overall cost, and it just helps to kind of explain, you know, why we're making the investments in infrastructure. And I think there's, you know, to the comment that was previously made around citizens assume that their property taxes are going to paving, and, you know, just it's a discussion point that's good for us to have.
Sure.
Were you looking just for a point of why we have substandard roads, or trying to get a number for what would it take to get us to a 5?
There you go.
Which would be, I realize, a projection, but I think it's
Yeah.
going to stun people to know what kind of money we need to get roads to a 5.
Yes, it will. Go ahead, Dave.
Ryan does have a presentation. Early in the summer, you had asked for him to come up with that cost. He has it all. He has all that prepared. It comes out to about $1.5 million every year for the next 6 years, just to get everything up to a 5, and that's taking into account that everything out of 5 doesn't go below a 5 in those 6 years.
So we're looking at about $6 to $7 million total, right?
Just to catch up everything up to a 5. Unfortunately, there's a lot of them wiggling right at 5 too, so.
Be nice to see that detail. Just background, it's just great background information for council to have.
Well, then it brings us back to the question around bonding, you
Yes,
know, versus property
exactly right.
taxes. So,
That's exactly right.
and the timing on that, on all of that.
Anything more?
Further questions related to paving? Questions questions on non-major funds?
Can you talk a little bit about that Headwaters Industrial Park? Why it's landed in a deficit position, you know, kind of I mean, this is an education for me, kind of the origination
Yeah, it was an
of this.
education for me as well.
Yeah.
At some point in the past, the city decided to develop the Headwaters Industrial Park. I believe it was around 2008 or something along that, or 2007, when the market was good and everybody was looking to buy real estate and things like that. So they invested in the infrastructure, water, sewer, curbs, roads, whatever the case may be. And if you look at, let me see if I can go back, I don't have that, but so they borrowed the money to do that, and they had debt service related to those projects. However, the debt service that was passed at the time was not enough to cover the bond that was sold. So what they did instead was to special assess the city's own property, so that the city then would pay the special assessment to the county, and it would go back and come back to the city. So, telling you the truth. So it was a way not to raise the debt service. I mean, I'm only looking at this from a past. I mean, I took
From what happened?
I took a half a day to try to figure, or maybe even more, Sandy, try to figure out what happened. So what they did is they borrowed money for infrastructure. They bonded for part of the infrastructure. They bonded for all the infrastructure, but they didn't levy to cover all of the infrastructure bond. So instead, they said, okay, we'll special assess that. And I think the thought was this. I think that they thought the land was going to sell really quick and fast. So to put a special assessment on, then whoever bought the land would pay the special assessment. Well, it didn't turn out that way. So the city paid debt service and its own special assessment monies for 10 years, or 9 years, I think it was. So in order to pay that, we paid it out of cash, which, since there was no revenue coming into the Headwaters account from anything, it began to build the deficit on the Headwaters account because of this paying the special assessment.
And it has continued to build.
It has continued to build until the end of 2018, when the last special assessment payment was made.
Oh, boy.
There are no more special assessments paid. So it's done.
And what year how old is this property?
I believe this is 19, so I believe I think it was started pre-2008, and I believe, if my memory serves me, it was a 9-year special assessment. So it was kind of in theory, it wasn't a bad idea, kind of, that maybe they'd sell the land, but they misjudged whatever the market was. So they got stuck paying the full debt service in just a very unusual way to pay it.
That was right about the time the economy crashed.
2008, yeah. Yeah, so.
I think there were some promises made too at that time about, yeah, we'll buy this or buy that, and that kind of just fell through to at the time.
So the only option you have here is, like I said earlier, two things. Is one, that you say, okay, we've got, what is it, 800? $850,000 deficit, that you say, okay, we'll take it out of cash balance somewhere, which is a big number, and you'd have to look and see what that does to your fund balance policies. Or you say, okay, it's not going to be much bigger, and we have to verify it's not going to get much bigger. So we'll let it sit until we sell the land for development. And when you do sell the land, hopefully you don't have to sell it only for $1, for incentive-wise. So it's a mishmash of magic something, I don't know. So that's the story.
It is not currently a drag on the levy, right? It's sitting with a negative balance.
Yes, the last payment was made and the levy fell off. That's how you were able last year to increase the contribution to the capital equipment fund, because the payment for this and something else fell off the bond, so that they just upped the other side of the levy.
We we aren't the only ones that caught into that thing too. And, I was up in North Branch just a few days ago, and they got some issues up there too. There's a brand-new building sitting there totally empty, and infrastructure that isn't being used, and so there's some debt there too. And so, got to be really careful, those sorts of things, so.
Yep, you do.
Any further questions related to non-major funds? Okay. We talked about the capital equipment fund a little bit. Any further discussion?
No, I just needed the clarity on new versus replacement. I got that question answered. Yeah, this is pretty straightforward for me.
Agree.
We talked about this for a year.
Water fund.
Yeah.
So I am interested in hearing thoughts that feedback you'll be getting in your meetings coming up related to how we bundle these from a financing position.
Correct.
I think we've, from my sense, given what we've done on the rate study and what we've done for identifying needs, that portion is, I feel like we've done a fair amount of legwork already. It's now just how do we bundle from a project perspective and an execution perspective. Getting to that next layer of planning, I think, would be helpful.
And the important part here is the financing of all these. Because depending on the rates and depending on when you sell the bonds, it may positively or negatively affect the rate structure that you have in place and that we've put in place for 5 years. I mean, let's just say, and I'm not saying this will happen, but let's just say that the rates for bonds on $16 million are an exceptional rate and that we amortize that over 20 years. Well, that may change the need for higher rates, or not entirely, but it could, or it could, say, well, we need more rates. It just depends on how it's structured, and that's the question we will be posing to Ellers, our financial advisors, and say, okay, $16 million, what's the best way to do this? I mean, really, and if you look at this is only a 5-year period. This is a lot of work in 5 years. This is a lot of money going out, and this is a lot of projects that we'll have to go. And the bond for a 5-year improvement program isn't unusual. I mean, it's the amortization, and it's when it's done. And in the meantime, if we're not spending right away $2 million on the water tower in 2023, you approved earlier an investment firm that will help us at least gain some of that back by investing that money a little bit longer term.
So to clarify the point you're making, Patrick, the bonding this, the 16.8 million, and then phasing in the projects may negate the need to potentially increase those water rates.
It may alter it to a positive or a negative way. I don't know yet. I haven't seen the numbers. It could negatively impact it and have them go up, or it could positively impact it and have them go down. Probably, and it won't be significant. I mean, I think this year's a 15% one. And next year's a 15%. Well, it might be 12, but still, any little assistance in keeping those down should help the ratepayers. And hopefully, once we get by this, we'll be set for a while. But then again, that depends on what Dave's got up his sleeve for the next time.
Further questions or discussion related to water fund? All right, next slide. Sewer fund, short and sweet. Anything further? It would, just for purposes of illustration, actually, maybe it's, do we have a fund balance plan in the packet for the sewer fund?
No, we do not.
It'd be helpful to just see that, just confirmation. Same with the water fund. Next slide.
That's it.
Questions? Council, any other items of discussion, questions, things we want to see in future? We've got 2 additional workshop sessions plus the final certification. The regular council meeting on September 23rd will certify the levy. Any other items that you want to see of staff or questions?
I guess my question would be, it's a pretty decent-sized increase, but is it enough for everything we want to do?
No, it's not. It's really not. I mean, you need a lot more. I mean, you've got some significant challenges that have been overlooked in the past, especially with infrastructure. You have significant challenges with something like water billing and staffing and other staff positions that are possible. I mean, we're not going crazy, but if you just look at the magnitude of the hole that you've dug, that's been dug for infrastructure, no, it's not going to be enough. But we have to start, and that's why, I mean, I could have put $1.5 million in the levy, and for the next 6 years we would have been good. But $1.5 million is if this was a 7%, it's 45% increase, whatever it was. So no, it's not enough. And I mean, and that's the challenge of budgeting and trying to know what's coming. And I think that, again, it's very important for us to look down the road and figure out how to get there. And we just can't keep going year to year to year to year. It just doesn't work well. I've done this enough that I've seen different organizations I've worked at try it both ways. And it just doesn't work when you don't look long-term. So,
I think for me, that's why I'm interested in seeing that analysis around bonding for that water infrastructure. And just kind of looking at that, what is in the best interest of our taxpayers on this issue and those that are paying the water bills, right? Is it to phase it in on an annual basis?
Right.
You know, and I think that's the reason we wanted to do the strategic planning as well, because we know we have a lot of need, and how can we best phase all of that in, you know, over a period of time.
and a plan like that allows the public to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Right.
I mean, because if you go to the public and say, I increased rates, I mean, your levy by 7, 8, 9, 10%, and you can't tell them why, it's difficult. I mean, this is going to be a hard enough, say 7% if that's what it stays at. But if we go to $1.6 million every year for the next 6 years to get to us to a 5, and which also means it's going to have to be more than $1.6 million after 5 years, because we're only just catching up and to maintain. You need to tell them why, and we need to be responsible and say, here, we've looked at this really close, and here's why we need it. And it's a better way to, you know, and we talk about transparency, and that's really what it is. It's important. So, but it's a big task, and something I don't think everybody's been quite used to here yet. And it's kind of about getting everybody up to speed, not only staff, but council, but also the public.
And I think to continue to balance those needs, those expenditures, with growth.
Correct.
You know, we need to be attractive to
Well,
residents and to businesses.
Absolutely, and that doesn't even take into consideration what we talked about, extending water and sewer and roads for economic development, which is I think I said to the CDA, in my opinion, is a better way to spend your economic development money to put the roads, water, and sewer in, so it's easier for somebody to walk in and say, hey, we'll build a house, we'll build apartments, we'll build a business, because that's a big challenge. So.
One more maybe quick point of comment. It does, you know, a situation like this and the deficit position that we're in and some of our infrastructure plans kind of puts extra emphasis on the needs for us to be aggressive with other sources of funding. As I understand it, the state list of all of the grant applications, of which we are part of that list has come out, and the next steps are being planned by state leadership. So now's the time for us to also, you know, make sure that we are being active in pursuing those and making sure that we're following up. Brian sent a note to Patrick and myself, and we will be following up with state leadership to make sure that our application is considered along with everyone else's application. no surprise, of course, the number of applicants are far greater than dollars available, and so time for us to market some of those ideas in the market, that, the fact that we just have not been a recipient of those funds in the past.
And to follow it up, I think it's, the time is right for the city to look at a lobbyist. I really do. I think that while we can contact state legislature and senators and things, maybe having somebody on a retainer to do some professional lobbying to tell people in the capital that Forest Lake needs this, 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 and get it done, maybe worthwhile. I don't know what that costs, but I think it's time for us to start to explore that.
There's certainly a process to receiving those dollars and somebody that can walk it through, so worth us looking into exploring further, for sure.
Does the League of Minnesota Cities offer any of those kinds of services?
Not lobbying service, no. I mean, they lobby for general policy issues that they believe are correct, like, let's say, tobacco 21, or that, building permit fees shouldn't be capped. But as far as individual city lobbying, no, they don't. I mean, they lobbied when the state was talking about raising gas taxes and things and for infrastructure. I mean, they were lobbying and had position papers
Right.
favoring some of that and not favoring others. But on an individual basis, no, they don't.
Okay. Certainly a path that many of our, in this instance, competing cities are going down, though. It's something for us to consider.
Yeah. And I didn't necessarily mean kind of giveaway of services.
No, I
because
know.
we're a member, but the opportunity to contract with.
No,
You know,
yeah, they
somebody
don't offer
potentially.
that service.
Okay.
Other comments, things we want to see, next steps?
Well, we have a list of questions that we need to get back to you on. I'm sure they've been recorded, and I've got my notes, so I'll read them. And we will try to put together a summary memo responding to each one of those questions and get it out to you as soon as possible.
Terrific. I understand this is a ton of work, so thank you for the work that's gone into get us to this spot, and look forward to getting us complete here by the end of September.
We'll get there.
Okay, very good.
Sandra hit the ground running.
Full-time job. She's not running fast enough, no.
Not hearing any further discussion, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion and second. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And we're adjourned.